Mr. President, I rise today along with colleagues to look back at a year ago, January 6th, 2021. I wish this was actually a bipartisan coming together today. A horrible, tragic day in our nation's history. But it's not enough to look back. We also need to look at what's happening today, because the threats against our democracy didn't go away when those black metal fences came down. Some of these threats against the democracy have found fertile soil right in this very chamber. January 6th, 2021 will go down in history as one of the worst days our nation has ever faced. It was disturbing, it was frightening, it was enraging. I know that I will never, ever forget it. Many people who were working here that day still carry scars. Some can be seen, and some can only be felt. The Capitol Police, the DC Police, the National Guard members, our other first responders, Capitol staff who were there that day are really heroes. And they deserve our thanks and our continued support. What we all witnessed that day was nothing less than a violent insurrection against the very seat of our democracy and our American form of government. It was sparked by a big lie, concocted by a political loser, and fueled by a network of his supporters. So let me take a moment to remind everyone that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election fair and square. In my home state of Michigan, in the middle of a pandemic, more people voted than ever before, 5.5 million people. And Michigan voters clearly and resoundingly chose Joe Biden to be our president and Kamala Harris to be our vice president. But instead of accepting defeat gracefully, like every other president in our history, Democrat or Republican, Donald Trump claimed that the election had been stolen from him. No one likes to lose an election. I've done both, winning and losing. It's not fun. But his election was not stolen from him. But this big lie has fueled an entire movement, people who will stop at nothing, including deadly violence, to undermine our Constitution and our country. They attacked our Capitol a year ago today on January 6th. They'll use and incite violence to disrupt future elections if they feel they need to. And now they're organizing on the state level to challenge the rules and take away people's freedom to vote. And tragically, our colleagues across the aisle are standing by and allowing this continuing attack on our democracy. We should be standing together, Democrats and Republicans, saying no to this assault on our Constitution and our country. Republicans said the right things that day. The senior senator from South Carolina said soon after the riot that he was humiliated and embarrassed for our country and that Trump should, quote, count him out. But a few short weeks later, Trump counted him in for 2 days of golf and dining at Mar-a-Lago. And then there's the Republican leader. He said that the January 6th riots were, quote, fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth because he was angry he'd lost an election. He added that Trump was practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day, and he was right. Then the Republican leader and the majority of Republicans voted no on impeachment. They opposed a bipartisan commission to investigate the events of January 6th. They blocked 3 bills to protect our freedom to vote. And they endorsed a Senate candidate who agrees with Trump that the 2020 election was stolen from him. In total, 147 Republican members of the House and Senate, 147, voted to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And a number of those 8 Republican senators still won't admit that Joe Biden is our duly elected president. Why am I focusing on this? Because our country has reached a critical crossroads. Either we are going to come together as Americans, defend our democracy, and look back on January 6th as a painful low point in our nation's history, or we can turn our power to a mob that is willing to do anything and say anything to dismantle our democracy and destroy this
Would my colleague yield
called
for a
America.
minute?
I would be happy to yield.
Okay.
Let me just conclude by saying that either we are going to come together as Americans, which I hope and pray we do, to defend our democracy and look back on January 6th as a painful low point in our nation's history, or we can turn over power to a mob that is willing to do anything and say anything to dismantle our democracy and destroy this grand experiment called America. The January 6th insurrectionists tried to overthrow our Capitol, and their sidekicks in suits and ties are trying to overthrow our elections. And just as we shored up our security here to protect the people's house, we need to upgrade our election laws to protect people's freedom to vote. Today is a day to remember, to be grateful for all of those who risked and lost their lives to protect us, to be grateful for all of those who stood up for our democracy and continue to stand up every single day. Today is a day to be grateful that we live in this great democracy called America. And it's a day to recommit ourselves to protect our freedoms for our children and our grandchildren.